Hello everyone, this is the channel AgileSeeker and we're here talking about interesting stuff with interesting people, and today my guest is Paddy Dhanda, Agile Practice Director from QA Ltd. So thank you for joining us, and Paddy will tell us a lot of interesting stuff, a lot of his rich experience in agility. Thank you for accepting the proposal, Paddy, and hope we're going to have a very good session.
Oh, thank you, Arman. I'm really pleased to be here, to be honest. I've seen some of your talks online, and it's great to actually have the opportunity to be on your show.
Thanks. Thank you very much for warm words. So as a general question, let's call it like a aperitivo. Let's call it like this. How you started all of this? How you get into the agility? Because there is always a unique story behind that, how people get into the agile, how they get introduced. So tell us this story. I think it will be very interesting.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I'm rewinding. Without giving my age away, I'm going to flash back to about the year 2003. So that was when I was working for a large telecoms organization in the UK. And I was still a young graduate back then. And the organization had just, we just hired a new CIO. And the CIO was really forward-looking, and he had come across Agile as a way of working. So if we can appreciate, the Agile Manifesto only came out in 2001. It was great to see a CIO really sort of embrace and champion Agile as a concept so early on. And he pretty much said overnight, we were all going to have to switch to this other way of working. And that was really driven by the fact that we were trying to deliver large programs, big change programs, but they kept failing. And they kept failing for the same reasons, because we were planning for programs almost a year in advance, and requirements kept changing, budgets kept being blown, and it just wasn't working. So we needed to change something. And so I was a young graduate, and I was asked to go on some Agile training. I was part of the first guinea pigs to be put through that Agile training. And it was literally 2 hours. We were given around 2 hours of agility training, and then we were told to go into the big wide world and start practicing Agile. Now, the reality of that was we didn't do Agile very well. We really didn't know what we were doing, to be honest. We didn't have Agile coaches, and we were left to figure things out. But I think for me, Arman, and I'll touch upon this maybe a little bit later on as well, one of the great things that the leadership sort of instilled in us wasn't really the methods or the frameworks or the approaches. They defined almost the criteria within which they wanted us to operate. So the criteria was, no longer were we going to be releasing software every 12 months. What we now had to do was produce software every 90 days. So every 3 months, every single team in the organization must produce something. What that thing was down to the teams to agree with their stakeholders. And we could use Agile, Wagile, Fragile, whatever you want to call it, to deliver every 90 days. And that was really the only guidance we got. So we could use some of the Agile frameworks we wanted, or we could stick to waterfall. And if that worked for us, great. But as long as we delivered something that was of value. So that's how I got into Agile.
And how the team reacted on this? Because you came up after this 2 hours training, which I believe is too small amount, as you mentioned. How the team reacted? Because usually people resist with something new anyway. So the first reaction usually from human psychology is resistance. How the team react, and if there was a resistance, what was, like, let's call it, your actions about getting them with you into Agile world?
Oh, that was really interesting, because the organization I worked for was an ex-government organization. And so we had people working around us who had been part of that original organization. And so the culture was very different. I wouldn't say it was as dynamic as maybe some of the other sort of competitors that we see now. And so for a lot of people, there's a big shock. And I remember there were a couple of colleagues who were there who'd worked there 25 or 30 years. And for them, their desk, so you imagine just their desk where they come and work every day, They had photos of their families, of the kids, of the grandchildren, everything. And that was their little shrine. And so every day they would come in and that was their space. Well, when we went with this new way of working, one of the things that we were all told was your desk is no longer your desk. We can sit anywhere. We sit wherever the team are huddled. And if that means, next week I'm working with a set of people on a different floor, then I must sit at one of those desks. So how do people react? Well, I'll be honest, we had a lot of people leave. We had lots and lots of people leave because they just didn't want to change their ways of working so drastically. And I think a lot of people had a big culture shock. Others, like myself, I knew no better because I was so early into my career. I just assumed this was the way everyone was working. I didn't really appreciate that time that we were almost sort of the front leaders when it comes to adoption of Agile at such a large scale. And so I remember a few of my other colleagues as well, who were very new into the organization. We were just trying to figure things out and quite enjoying it. It was an interesting time. I think for us, it was something that we embraced, but lots and lots of challenges for sure.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you that most of the people don't like these drastic changes. And I think that coming up for the first serious challenge for people who are embracing the Agile journey or start practicing journeys, I think this internal switch about accepting the changes and trying to adapt, trying to learn new stuff, either keep with your own desk. It's a very good meta, can be used as a very good metaphoric expression about having your own desk is your world and they coming there for the last 20 years. And anything outside this desk is a danger, is a threat. And I don't think that much of changes from these years. There are a lot of people, and I'm just also talking about my experience as well. So if the team never worked with Agile and you're coming and saying, guys, there is a way of working, there is a mindset, we're going to be Agile, the first reaction is always like this: we're working very good. Who is this guy? What does he want for us? Is it a danger? Is it a threat that if I'm not adapt for this, I will be fired or something? So this obstacles, I think this is the first challenge for the Agile person. So for the people who stayed in there, who are ready to adopt this, who are ready to change, ready to learn, how do you get them with you? Are there was an Agile team, Agile leadership team, or you will start practicing their own? The environment for this practicing, for this experimenting, like exploring this new Agile world, how this worked?
So that's a great question. I was really lucky because I managed to get onto a program where we were doing some really cutting edge stuff. So it was a big CRM system, customer relationship management system for the organization. And we had a huge team of about 200 people scattered across the globe. And we had different locations, but predominantly we had a big team in London. And so I was part of that team there. And we were doing Agile at scale. Like, this is before the scaling frameworks really came about. I'm talking sort of 2005, 2004, something like that. And what the sort of leadership were doing was they acknowledged that scaling at such a large scale was really challenging, especially when we have all of these teams. And they adopted sort of big room planning. And what they did was they would bring all of us together for 3 days into a location somewhere in London. Usually it was a big hotel, and we would fly as many people as we could into the location. And we did 3 days of planning. And if people are familiar with SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework, I would say it was almost like the initial version of that PI planning approach, because I know obviously SAFe has been inspired by lots of other organizations like Nokia who were doing these sort of things before. But we had our own sort of version or variation of big room planning. And it was fantastic because everybody was on a learning journey. We were all figuring things out. There was no one in that room that could say, I've done this before, like that. I've developed software with 200 people together. and we've planned this global sort of initiative. So we were all learning, and we all knew we'd make mistakes. I just have to say we were really lucky with the people that I was working with. They were really hungry to learn. I very rarely saw anyone complain. It was just about, well, let's fix it. If it's broken, let's fix it. But that 3-day event was amazing. So what we did on the first 2 days were each Scrum team, they would have their product owners talk about the upcoming features that they wanted to prioritize. And so the teams then went off and did some estimation. And we had this big spreadsheet projected on the front of the room. And every time a team would estimate, the Scrum Masters would run and they would input their estimates. And over the 2 days, we would see the demand versus the actual estimates. And we could see the demand was way higher than the actual capacities of the teams. And the third day was brilliant, because what we did on the third day was we got the product owners, the business owners, the stakeholders to come and join us. And they would then fight it out amongst each other, and they would negotiate, because they couldn't all have everything that they wanted. So as technologists, we almost removed ourselves away from the politics of those decisions, and we let them fight it out. And it was great. It was great to see people negotiating. I mean, I remember hearing conversations where someone in marketing was saying, hey, sales, let me put this feature in this time. And then next time I'll vote for yours and you can have yours instead of mine. So they were negotiating features, which was great to see. And that's how we did it. So it was, I think I was very lucky. I was definitely very lucky with the people that I was with. And it was very rare that we really did have anyone sort of objecting to this approach. And then it inspired lots of other teams to do similar things. So it was great to then see the organization moving in this direction.
Yeah, it's always inspiring when you see the other teams that are following the example. Interesting thing that I noticed during your during the story that you shared with us is that that you give the whole team to this hotel. So I do believe this is because of the management support of this whole agility journey. So it was like supported from your management. So this is one of the key elements which I usually identify when I'm talking with our students or more younger generations who are like planning their agility, that it is very essential to understand that management supports the agile values, the agile mindset, which we are trying to incorporate. Because currently what I was noticing, at least in my country, in my projects and in other companies that I was a witness of, is that many people treat agile different. So they are like this, okay, something is working wrong, let's implement agile, and they expect result in next couple of days or next couple of months even. And then we know that it's a marathon, not a sprint, about doing this. And I think this is very, very essential to talk with the management and to explain them what is agile is about, and to align their expectations, I guess, with deliverables which the agile needs to get to. So I think this is the key of starting any agile implementation, let's call it like this, in any kind of the company. So as years go and you're like evolving, going more deeper in your agile. So what was next? I mean, what was your next step when you figure out that you are pretty much mature in agile, when you start coaching teams? So let's talk about a little bit your evolution from like agile starter, let's call it like this, to going to the person who can give advices, coach people, or coach multiple teams. So how was this transition for you, and when you feel this confidence to start guiding teams?
So first thing to know about me, Arman, I'm a total introvert, right? When I was growing up, I was the last person ever to put my hand up in the classroom. And those that know me now would probably find that quite difficult to believe, because of like, I do a lot of stuff now on social media.
We're talking a couple of minutes and it's obviously for me hard to believe as well.
So like I was always a person who would be reluctant to put themselves forward to even stand up and talk. So never mind going in and training people and coaching people, that was never really my thing. And I remember actually, you know, before I kind of got into the coaching side, I really wanted to make sure I was credible and that I understood what I was talking about. And I'll just give a quick story about one of the big programs I was working on, which, we followed Agile to the letter. So we literally had, a sort of a global program. We had teams who were following Scrum, following all the ceremonies, and we delivered on time and we delivered to budget. And it was about a year worth of work. And I remember at the end, as technologists, we were all celebrating because of all the hard work we had done. And what was interesting was within, I think, about 2 weeks of that product going out live and being used, our stakeholders and users rejected the platform, and they revolted and they said, we do not want to use this. This is not good. And that was a real shock for me, because I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand why. I mean, we had done sprints and we had done demos, we had done show and tells, we had literally done all of the things that, good practice tells us. Now, what I put that down to was the fact that the product owners that we were given from our business side, they hadn't worked in the field for many, many years. So these were SMEs who were salespeople who were telling us as technologists what to prioritize and what were some of the things they needed. But they hadn't really been in touch with real salespeople for quite a while. And I think what I really learned about that is when people say, talk to an SME, that's a loaded term. Like, who is an SME, right? Who is it? Someone that's worked in a field for many, many years? Are they all of a sudden an SME? Or is it the person that really understands what the user needs? And so I believe it's the latter. And so then what happened was they redid that whole program, and we did it again. Spent another year of my life on a big program. And this time I was asked to be a product owner for one of the streams. And I was determined to make sure from my side, did everything I could. So I would sit with the users every day. I would literally station myself next to salespeople, and I wanted to live and breathe everything that they were living and breathing. I would go with them to client meetings. And so over time, I felt like I would immerse myself with our stakeholders and the challenges they were having. So leading up to your question about coaching and training, I mean, as an organization, we then went through a phase where we wanted to train up all of our vendors in our approach to Agile, because the organization, we had our own flavor of Agile. And because of all of these experiences, I was asked to go out to India, and I spent a few months in India training up our vendors in our approach to Agile. And again, I think that was a masterstroke by the organization, because usually I see organizations say, hey, you're a vendor, you do your own training, right? You pay for your own training. Why should we educate vendors? Well, actually, the organization I worked for, they didn't believe in that. They felt that if they're working on our products, you are part of the family. And so we flew around India training people. And then when I'd get these tough questions about product ownership, or the sort of challenges that they were having, I started to feel a bit more confident that I could talk to them and use some of the stories that I had gone through to talk with conviction. And I think if I hadn't had that, and I'd just been very academic and gone in there and just told them the theory, I would have been laughed out that room. So I think, that was a point where I really started feeling like, hey, I think I can share some experiences, and I think that's something I'm okay at. And then I got a hunger for coaching and training.
I see. So it was pretty much not so easy transition, let's call it like this, for you. So you have your own challenges about this transformation, because this is usually difficult. I mean, going even from project management to just being a coaching. So one thing is about doing something. Second one is coaching people to do things correctly. Yeah. So I always remember these two differences. Yeah. Do the correct things and do the things correctly. So this is the two big differences I think the agile coaches always feel about it. So speaking about one of your big achievements, I had the opportunity to get informed of about your Deutsche Bank experience. So I will try to briefly introduce. So if as I understand, you leaded the learning sessions, like the teaching sessions of the 20K people in the Deutsche Bank. So this is a pretty big and impressive number, and even half of it is very impressive. Let's call it like this. Let's talk about this, because there is, I will ask you why it is very, very important for me, because many people tend to believe that Agile is difficult to scale, Agile difficult to apply to big amount of people. So it's like always, if you look into the Agile, it's always like focusing on the shorter term, smaller teams and everything. But there is this one big, let's call it elephant, 20K people. So how this started, and if you don't mind going a bit deeper in there, how was this process organized, and what kind of impediments you have faced on this? And most important, what have you learned from this experience?
Oh, wow, Arman, that's such a big question. And, you know, those 3.5 years I spent at Deutsche Bank, sort of in that role, I learned more in those 3.5 years that I'll ever learn, I think, in my whole lifetime about Agile and how to go through good Agile transformations. I mean, it started with me having resigned. I had resigned from Deutsche Bank. I was an Agile practitioner there. And, you know, I just got to the point where I felt like there was more. I wanted to do more. And it was a point in my life when I was thinking about different directions. And I decided to resign. And I was in London, and I bumped into a lady, an amazing lady. Her name's Gabrielle Patrick. I had heard she was setting up a new team, and the organization was going in this new strategic direction to bring in more agility. And I just started speaking to her in the corridor, and she told me about this new team. And within about 2 minutes, I said, "Hey, Gabby, I want to work for you. I want to do this. This is what I think I was here for." And she said, "Well, what can you do?" I said, "I don't know. What do you need me to do?" And she said, "Well, have you ever done any training?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've done a little bit. I've done a little bit." I said, "Okay, you can be my head of learning for Agile for the bank." And it seemed like a great title. And I was like, "Oh, wow, I'd love to do that." And so that's where it started. That's how it started. And then she told me that the role required me to educate 100,000 people in the organization and educate them about Agile. And that's when it started sinking in that, hey, maybe this was too much for me to do. This was too big a role, and I should have just kept my mouth shut. So I unresigned, and I joined the team. And we started off thinking we could bring in a vendor and we could co-create some learning, some training, and that we could then use that same collateral and start to roll it out as training for other teams. The particular vendor, I won't name them, they spent about 3 days in a room locked with me. I had 5 of these consultants with me. And by the second day, I pretty much walked out the room, Arman. It was such a crazy experience. The consultants were all arguing with one another. Each one was saying, "I believe we should teach this." Someone else was saying, "No, we should put this in the course." And they couldn't even agree upon some of the fundamentals of agility. So as a result of that, we made an active decision that we were going to build our own training collateral in-house. And we have lots of Agile coaches in the organization. So I pulled upon those folks, and we had some Agile coaches in our team as well. And all of a sudden, we were all swarming together on this sort of educational piece. And in the end, we created what is now known as the Agile University at Deutsche Bank. And it was an internal education site. All the courses were hand-built by coaches and other Agile practitioners that work there. And initially, we didn't have anyone to train people. So I got to be the trainer. And I was literally, for 1 year, I think I visited 15 different countries. I was literally flying everywhere. Like I was out in Hong Kong.
Additional benefit, I think.
Sorry?
It's an additional benefit, I guess, of traveling purposes.
It depends how you look at it. Yes, I certainly felt that way, but my wife didn't, and my kids didn't. So that was the trade-off. But yeah, I got to see so many different parts of the bank, so many different teams, challenges. And it wasn't just training. I'd have to go there and do some coaching, because teams would say, hey, now that we've done the learning, help us embed some of this learning. So that was really the role. And then about a year and a half into the journey, my sort of manager, she said, hey, if you're still doing this in another year and a half, then you failed in this task, because the idea wasn't for me to be a dependency, like for the organization to have me as a dependency. It was to empower and scale. So what we decided to do then was start to build a scalable model for training. And what we did was we launched some boot camps whereby we were going to help equip Agile practitioners, and they would become part of our guild of trainers. And we agreed with the very senior management to build a business case to say, look, if we can have just one day from each of these people a month, and they can deliver some training, this is the cost saving overall. And so we ended up across the globe having over 100 Agile trainers accredited internally on our material, and they were able to deliver some of our core training. And that's where I sort of took a slight step back and did less of the actual training, but did more of the kind of the management of the whole Agile University to make sure it was all running. And that's how we managed to train over 20,000 people. And I believe it's still going. So I left Deutsche Bank about 2 years ago, and I still see lovely messages on LinkedIn where people say, hey, I just got my Agile University certificate. So it's great to see the work's carried on. And although we as a team, we moved on, the organization is now organically continuing that journey.
So one of the points, I guess, of implementing the Agile education, Agile culture in the company is some kind of a legacy. I mean, when you see that something that was implemented, like organically placed in there, and something as evolving and by its nature as agility, is like seeing what we're saying. Like you see that people that after you left, that the program is evolving, people are getting there, so they have this eager for constant learning. And I think this is what perfectly Agile is about, and why the Agile education is coming on the first places. One more question just was raising. Many people claim that banks itself, like these financial institutions, have their big limitations for agility because of these supervising systems over usually governmental controlling systems and everything. So what do you think, like being a part of such a big bank as a Deutsche Bank in there, how was this impediments? I mean, do they really kill agility, or from the other hand, they gave you the stimulus to find a walk around, find to adaptation, something like this? How was this controlling part organized?
No, again, that's a really interesting question, because, banks have so much legacy technology. There is just so much legacy in there. And we often say it's hard to be a startup as a bank, because you've got so much complexity that we've got to unpick. And not just that, there's lots of complexity in terms of ownership. So, different systems fall under different departments, different divisions, different management, different leadership. And so it's not a simple case of just taking all these technology systems and saying, hey, now we're going to run them in this really fast and super duper way. So I think there's a lot of complexity, cultural complexity, all of these different elements. But one of the amazing things that we did, again, part of our wider team, and it was really spearheaded by a great leader, Paul Shepard. Shep was absolutely amazing. He had a vision to provide a service to the wider bank. So we kind of managed some of the change management processes. And his vision was, he wanted to be able to enable teams to go from idea to production in a day. So idea to production safely in a day, actually. So that was the bit I missed. And that was unheard of. Like, it was something that I remember when I first started talking about that in some of my training sessions within the bank, to say, look, this is the vision. This is where we want to get to. Because a lot of people, they would come to the training and say, well, how can we possibly be agile? Like my release process today takes 6 months. Like, how can I possibly reduce that to 2 weeks? And I was standing up there saying, well, I think we can get it to 1 day. And people were looking at me like I'd lost my mind, because they just didn't feel that that was possible. And so we put this process in place, and it was an ability for people to use. Now, it wasn't for every single change. Like, we were never advocating that this be used for every single change that you need to make. But there are always occasions where we do need to respond quickly. We do need to get features out there in speed. And so there was a set of criteria to say, for you to make use of this process, do you have automated testing in place? Do you have a good quality standard in terms of your previous releases? So we would check their defect rates, all of these things, to make sure, if there was a team that was very risky, we didn't want them to make use of this approach and then totally fail. So there were safeguards in place, but it was a really nice sort of process that anyone could kind of then take advantage of. And that became really successful. Lots of teams started to make use of that approach. So that was just one example where we managed to completely change the perception of banking and release of software. The other example I remember was working with our digital factory over in Frankfurt, and that was where the cool kids used to hang out. Like, that was the retail apps side of the business. And I remember, I may be wrong on this, but I remember at the time there was talk of how the digital factory had launched the first retail banking app on the Apple Watch in Germany. So they were first to market with that. And again, they were using agile ways of working. And again, they blew that perception of big, large banks not being able to deliver in such quick cycles.
I see. And I think one of the lessons, and not the lessons, but one of the core ideas is that what I see actually now is that for the younger generations, they have already this organic agility. So many young students, many young people are asking me about the career. I already see in them that they are eager to change. They have different criteria of successful work. So they're not limited by their desk. They are more global. They are more open-minded. And this mindset growth mindset is constantly evolving. I mean, and I think this is something that will continue to evolve organically. And I think that the Agile coach is the key part on this as a milestones and the way to guide the Agile project and Agile mindset on a way where it should be. Talking about coming back to your journey, after finalizing with Deutsche Bank, you said 2 years ago finalizing. What was your next step? Because well, from what I understand, it was a really big project with such amount of people. So basically, two questions arise on it. First of all, how you find another step which will motivate you? Because many people they tend to come to the level of Deutsche Bank or this 100K people turning on everything and saying this, oh, this was my North Star in my agility, so I already passed this one. So what was your next step, and how you keep your this mood, inspiring mood? I mean, how you motivate yourself on going further?
Again, Arman, I love the question, because that was exactly what was on my mind when we sort of ended up at that sort of end of that journey. There was a time where I was thinking, what's next? Where do I go? What do I do? Do I go back and become an agile practitioner, i.e., working in delivery, or do I stay in education? Where do I go? And it turned out there was a great opportunity with the organization I work for now, which is QA. And not a lot of people know about QA. QA in the UK, again, not many people know about us, but they remember some course they did many years ago, like maybe a Prince 2 course or something. And when we look at QA, I mean, they're the biggest tech training provider in the UK. So just to put that into context, QA trained over 250,000 people last year. We have sort of global clients, the likes of Unilever, the likes of BP, some of the big Microsoft, literally you could go through a lot of the top tech firms and non-tech firms, and QA have got some link in there. And again, I hadn't really appreciated the sheer size and scale of QA. And there was a role to head up their agile practice. And for me, that was an amazing opportunity, because the way things were when I joined QA, although we had lots of agile courses, and again, to put that into perspective, we have over 60 courses in agile ways of working. So that's a pretty big portfolio. Yeah. And in total, we have over 2,000 courses. So it's a pretty big learning sort of offering. But what I was told was, we need someone to come in and really shape the strategy for agile. And it's pretty much a blank canvas. Whether we want to build new products, change existing products, retire products, whatever we want to do. And it was an opportunity too good for me to ignore. And it was, as you mentioned, it was tough to find that next step from Deutsche Bank. But I think QA is probably one of the few organizations that really enticed me at the time, because of that sheer opportunity that they had. And I have to say, the work that I've been doing there since I joined it's been phenomenal. Like I get to speak to so many accreditation bodies to build those relationships, to really understand what's happening out in the market. I get to speak to clients daily, big organizations, and bring some of my experiences to the table there. We're building some cutting edge products. It's phenomenal. We're taking truly blended solutions, and we're creating multi-month learning experiences. So they're not just courses that someone comes on for a couple of days, but for example, we've just launched an agile coaching program, which is a 6-month program for agile coaches, and it has the accreditations from IC Agile embedded in there. But we've tried to make it a really immersive experience for learners, and they get to do lots of hands-on practice back at the workplace. So I think I was able to really bring some of my own flavor to the role, which, and then to see it in front of you being built and people benefiting from it has been amazing. The other program we've just launched is a product ownership program, again, a 6-month program to help product owners go from kind of good to great. Again, lots of hands-on experience back at the workplace. And yeah, I mean, I could go on all day about QA, so I'll stop there. But it has been a really exciting journey so far in terms of that role. What will be after QA? I don't know. That's going to be a tough one. That'll be a tough one. So maybe I'll
Let's
retire.
keep the future for future. Yeah, being agile, thinking one thing at the stuff. So very interesting stuff. So you mentioned the certification. So there's always a global question that wonders me. What's your opinion about certifications? Because many people who are just starting in this profession, some of them are just obsessed, I'm not afraid of this word, of getting the correct certification. And because they do believe that the certification is the primary proof of their knowledge, or their, let's call it an unlocking door to the career path. So what's your opinion about certificates? Do we really need them? I have a couple of them. I'm really proud of them. So, but just your opinion as a multi-year experienced person in this field, are these certificates like an adding value, or it's just a key to unlock and everything else depends on a person?
So my views on certification have really changed. So when I was at Deutsche Bank, I remember we almost had a rule, and we said we're not going to give anyone a certification. So the Agile University had this moral code of conduct that we do not certify anyone. We believe much deeper into the learning experience and the impact of that learning. That hasn't changed. For me, that's absolutely the thing that I'm really passionate about is whatever learning someone goes through, it must make a difference to their life in some way. But what I would see is literally every other day, we would have learners contacting us saying, is this course certified? And if it's not certified, then my manager says he's going to send me on an external accreditation instead, because there was a perception that the internal training wasn't as good. And so eventually I went as far as getting some of the leading courses externally and mapping the learning outcomes against our learning outcomes. And their learning outcomes were that much and ours were like that much. So to try and show the leadership that, hey, this isn't cheap stuff that we're running here. This is actually probably superior to some of those external accreditations. We just don't give people the badge. But there was this psychological perception that it wasn't as good quality sometimes. And so in my mind, that was always a challenge. That was always something I was pondering over, was to say, maybe I got it wrong. Maybe I shouldn't have, sort of stuck to my guns on that. Maybe I should have given in and, got the courses accredited somehow. But we didn't. And I have to say, my time at QA, it again has kind of shifted my thinking a little bit, because I don't think it's individuals. I think we as individuals always have good intent. Like, we're all hungry to learn. The fact that some of us now want certificates and badges, I think that's a mark of society. I think, it's a mark of social media. I think organizations need to take ownership as well, because when organizations are recruiting for these roles, they'll list a bunch of badges that they will use as a way of filtering candidates out. And because the market is getting more and more competitive for jobs, everyone's looking for that differentiator. And I think having a badge, I mean, to me, what it shows is that person is passionate about that topic, right? So they've invested time and effort. They may have sat an exam, who knows what they had to do, but they've certainly spent the time and effort, and that's the proof of that. So for me, that's what that shows. And I think for an individual, it's an achievement, which is great. We all like to achieve things. However, the bit that I'm not so much of a fan of is how badges are given out, especially, there's one accrediting body out there, I'll leave them nameless, but they sell accreditations in Agile for like $50. And it's a money back guarantee if you fail. And I think what you get is a PDF document that you can read, and that's your training. And then you sit an exam. So, and I see individuals who receive the nice certificate off the back of that, posting it on social media, and all their friends and family are all posting saying, congratulations, well done, because it's an achievement. But in that instance, it's probably not as meaningful as someone really going on a much deeper learning experience. But hey, who am I to criticize anyone? If that's what someone wants to do, then fantastic. And provided it gives them the outcome that they're looking for. But I do think there are certain accreditations where it is a little bit too easy, and we do need to be careful there.
Yeah, I think actually what is it is that the background speaks for the certificate. So it's about what you put in to get the certificate. So it's always about the value you get. For me, actually, the certificate states that the person, first of all, he dedicated some time and effort, so he's definitely a focused person. Second one is at least that we can speak the same language if we're considering the path into the agility. So at least it makes my life easier. For example, as a hiring manager or as a teammate, that we speak on the same language. But at the end of the day, it's just a PDF document, as you mentioned. So if there is no supporting knowledge, mindset, flexibility, I think this will still remain a post in the social media. So I fully agree with you. Coming back to the agility path. So with such a big amount of agile coaches, agile practitioners, agile evangelists, this is something new that's created in the LinkedIn. What do you think? What stands you out? What makes you to stand out? So how you differentiate yourself? I do believe you have discussions and following and speaking with the people who are in the same industry with the same mindset. What stands you out? What do you think?
I mean, for me, I kind of touched upon it earlier, is the practice and getting hands-on and having the stories, having those war stories. So when someone is in a certain situation, being able to talk with credibility to say, look, I've seen something similar. It may not be exactly the same, And this is the outcome that we came to. I mean, I'm not a fan of always running in and rescuing people. So let's try and help people come to their own conclusions on things. But I certainly think, when people ask you for your opinion, to say, hey, what would you have done in this situation? Or do you have experience of that? Then I think as much experience as we can get, and having been there, seen it, done it, when it comes to training and having lots of certificates versus hands-on practice wins every day of the week. So I think, it's where people are able to talk with conviction and have those war stories. But I think a lot of it is attitude, right? So I just think when you meet a really, like I don't know, how do you call it? You call it an agile evangelist, right? Yeah, I think there's a certain personality that goes with an agilist, a true agilist. There's a certain personality. And it's not someone who has ego and is, very sort of command and control and all the rest of it. You just know, within seconds when you meet that person, I think you find that they have it or they don't. And it's a bit like servant leadership. So yeah. I myself do this. I teach Scrum Master courses and we talk about servant leadership. And I don't think you can learn servant leadership just from training courses, right? So servant leadership.
It should be inside a little bit.
Absolutely. And, so I would always say, look, the best way to learn servant leadership is go do some charity work, right? Go help your local school or go help some people and remove your title. They don't need to know like how much money you earn or what your title is. Just go in there and serve people. And I think just going through those experiences, those life experiences, will actually help shape our servant leadership qualities a lot more than putting up a slide and saying, these are the do's and don'ts. So I think life experiences as well, definitely. I mean, I know so many great agile coaches who started off into something totally different, not even technology. Like they're working in environments where they're working with lots of people, like medical professions, yeah, or others. And what they've seen is agile coaching. It's all about people, and it's about caring about people. It's about having that passion, and there's a certain personality that goes with that. And I think that for me, they're the people that will really excel in this field.
I think. Thanks, Tarek. Very, very good, actually, a very good answer. So I'm coming up to the main question, which I usually ask everyone who I'm hosting in the channel, like the big and unfortunately the last question. So if a person young enough, let's call it a teenager, comes to you and asks that, Paddy, I want to be an agile project manager, or I want to be an agile coach, I want to start my agility journey. What will be your advice? How you're gonna word it to make person passionate about this, to inspire? Because I do believe agility is about inspiration. So what will be your words for this person?
So I look at my own kids. My son's 9 and my daughter's 12. And I'll tell you a funny story about them, Arman. I was explaining to my daughter, she said to me one day, she said, Daddy, what do you actually do? Like, all I ever see you is stealing my Lego, right? And I was running agile courses, and I was trying to explain to her, and the way I explained it to her were, imagine animals in a jungle and their homes are going to get destroyed, and they now have to move somewhere else, and they have to quickly build their shelter. So I said they wouldn't spend months and months planning and then building and all of this stuff. And I said they will
actually build.
Yeah, they'll build something very basic and then they'll iterate. And she turned around and she went, Daddy, she said, but that's how I would do it anyway. Like, why do you need to train people into that thinking, right? So I think young people that are way younger than I, who are starting their career journey, I don't think they need to be told that agile is a good thing. I think they already know it. They probably know it way better than us, right? They have that mindset of, it's almost like it's a throwaway society at the moment. People buy some clothes, they'll wear them a couple of times and then they throw them away. It's about things, rapidly changing all the time. So I personally don't think that side of it is as important anymore. But what I do think is important is to learn about human connections and really understand human beings more. And I would love if we spent more effort on that. So really getting people to understand, the people they're going to be working with, what is their mindset? So just because they get agility and they get, that these concepts are part of their DNA, well, the people they're working with might be 10, 20 years older than them, and their mindset is very different. So as a young person coming into that team, how am I going to bring them along the journey with me? Or how am I going to fit into that environment? So I think for me, understanding humans and our sort of ability to work together more effectively, for me, would be the big thing that I would ask people to focus on. Practically, I would say, hey, don't spend loads of money on, all of the crazy training courses. And that's me saying that as someone who's in training. I would say, first get curious, build the curiosity, and I would say turn up to meetups. Meetups are the simplest, cheapest way for anyone to build their knowledge, and start to network with other practitioners, and find yourself a mentor, and go from there. And if you still find in 6 months that it's something you're serious about, come on a training course and really cement that knowledge.
So basically build something on your curiosity.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you very much, Paddy. It was amazing talk, and I really enjoyed that. I think there was very critical parts, very critical moments that we touched together, and it will be very, very interesting for the younger generation, or students and people who are watching this. And I'm very, very grateful for you that you find time in your busy schedule to coming to my channel. And thank you very much. Just a reminder, our viewers today, our guest was Paddy Dhanda, and he is Agile Practice Director in QA Ltd. Thank you very much, and I do hope that we'll meet once again and discuss more, let's call it more focused topic on an interesting webinar or a meetup, as you mentioned in there.
Arman, I just want to say thank you as well. It's been a real pleasure. Keep doing the great work you're doing. I mean, it's people like you who, again, take time out of your busy schedules and build these sort of, educational videos. So keep up the good work. We need more people like you. So
thank you.
Well done. Thanks.
Thank you very much for warm words. This was the channel AgileSeeker. So as Paddy saying, stay curious. See you next time. Bye-bye.